When you achieve what you value, that leads to happiness. Value fulfillment leads to happiness. This is the simplest, easiest formula of happiness. So if you're not happy, there could be only two reasons for that. Either you have not achieved what you value, that's quite straightforward, no price to guess that, or you might be pursuing something that you think you value, but in reality, that may not be true. More often than not, the reason for our unhappiness is that we are pursuing the wrong thing unknowingly and unconsciously. But why does that happen? Why is it so hard to discover what we truly value? Let's find out. This is part 2 of the 4-part series of how to discover what we really value. In part 1, I discovered what values really are, and in this episode, I'm going to discuss why is it so hard to discover what we really value. This forms the base for the next 2 episodes to follow. Right from childhood, we are bombarded with loads of information. We, however, are not born knowing what is good or bad, right or wrong for us. We are presented with all kinds of choices. Choices like whether to play with a ball or stick our finger in the electric socket or put a hand in the fire or ride the bicycle or get educated or have a job or pursue an art or get married or even vote. There is no inborn mechanism that tells us the answers to these questions. Our senses experience the reality as soon as we are born and fill us up with loads of data. Slowly we start grasping the identity of things and we start making concepts. Like for example, when we see a table for the first time in our lives, we don't know that this thing is called a table. We just see a solid object. But slowly and steadily we start understanding the shape and the feel of the object. Then we start differentiating it from chair and other objects. Then finally we get to know that this is called a table. And bingo, that is how the concept of table is formed. But nothing stops us from conceptualizing a table as a cupboard. Our learning depends on the experiences brought upon us by our environment and how well and correctly we conceptualize things. If we are not aware and mindful, we might live with incorrect, incomplete knowledge. Such a state of mind can only lead to uncertainty, complexity, and a lot of doubts. The way we learn the concept of table is the way we learn everything else in our lives. Our interests, needs, and beliefs start forming right from the childhood, some consciously and most unconsciously. And slowly, as we start acquiring knowledge and beliefs in our lives, our individuality, our self, starts taking shape and structure. We may internalize many emotions, experiences, knowledge, actions, and biases that may or may not be segregated, classified, conceptualized, and stored in our minds correctly. If nothing really stops us from conceptualizing a table as a cupboard, then nothing really stops us from classifying, say, a jealousy to be anxiety. We often face confusion as we keep going higher and higher in the hierarchy and complexity of concepts. The high level concepts of, say, love, freedom, happiness, work, marriage, or even values are not often differentiated, segregated, and understood intently and minutely. If we are not in focus while abstracting, generalizing, and forming concepts, then this could lead to all kinds of confusion regarding what we value and why. It's like constructing a 40-story building without really concentrating on how to lay the foundation or how to arrange the bricks or how to interlink the electric wires throughout the building. Such a building is likely to have cracks and architectural errors that can hamper its stability, strength, and beauty. In the same way, we most often are unaware of the connections that we have internalized and then automatized in our subconscious, in which our individuality, our self, our personality, our character is continuously being constructed. So our values might just be entangled with many other aspects. And that is why it becomes so difficult to discover what we really value. So now the question lies, what can we do? Well, we have to start from wherever we are, whichever floor of life we are at, and then think our way down to the foundation. We have to go down to the foundation floor by floor. And only once we reach the essence, the root of things, that's when our values start becoming clearer to us. This is the only way to entangle the knot. We cannot say that I should value this or that. Like we can't say that I should value creativity or power or wealth or security or benevolence or integrity and so on and so forth. It doesn't work like that. We cannot force our values onto ourselves. This is because unconsciously We have already formed the values while acquiring and accumulating information from the environment. Hence, we need to engage in a conscious process of discovering the already formed values. But peeling these layers down to the essence, to the foundation, is not easy. This is because our mind has to be evaluated by our mind itself. The mind is the patient as well as the doctor. This is hard. This is because it requires zooming out and looking at things objectively without getting influenced by our biases, our instincts, or our preconceived automatized judgments. Imagine if you were working on a computer on a software, say Microsoft Word, and typing something. Now, if the software started typing words all by itself, immediately you would realize that there is something incorrect, something wrong. This is because the software is separate from your own mind and you know how the software is supposed to function. You know the rules of the software. Now imagine if the same error detection had to be done by the software itself, which has the virus. It is the software that is typing, and it is the same software that is detecting whether the output is correct or not. This is hard. This is exactly the case with our minds. It is a mind that is producing emotions. It is a mind that is deciding and taking actions. And it is a mind that is evaluating whether these actions and decisions are correct or not. This is really hard. If you're really interested in discovering our values, if you're really interested in understanding how the human mind, our own mind functions, then the first thing to do is to acknowledge with full awareness that there can be a possibility of our minds running on an autopilot mode. That our minds might be processing the information and judgments automatically. It is the acknowledgement that the flaws of our self, our character, our personality might have been built unconsciously and maybe incorrectly. The best way to judge if we are clear about how our mind functions and what we really value is by paying close attention to how we feel. Our emotions are the barometer, the report card of our thinking and actions. If there is presence of negative emotions, if there is guilt or anger or sadness or jealousy or anxiety, then it's an indication that something is wrong. Let me state that emotions by their own are not good or bad. Like anger could be a very useful emotion, and grief and sadness could actually be genuine. But as of now, without really getting deep into the topic of emotion, let me state that if these negative emotions are the predominant emotions, especially anxiety, guilt, and envy, then one must have the courage and the will to acknowledge that there is a scope of improvement. This is the first step to be taken in order to discover your value structure, which is actually governing and influencing your actions and decisions. Self-awareness cannot be forced. Force and thinking can never coexist. Thinking is a skill that must be learned and learned willfully. Thinking can never get automatic. Only once we acknowledge this, we can start the process of discovering our true value. That hence becomes a very important point of discussion: how to discover what we really value. Stay tuned for part 3 of the series.